We're gonna try and find my son. He has really been on my mind for the last few weeks. I haven't heard from him except for the police will call me if they make contact, the hospitals will call, but for some reason a mom knows. We're gonna go and try and find Joshua. Let's hope we can find him. Oh, I brought Karma for protection. Carm, say hi. Say hi. I brought her for protection. I am also armed because I'm going into some pretty sketchy areas that I really shouldn't be going into alone. Karma, I'm running in to get something to drink. You protect the car while I'm gone. So before I drive, let me give you a little bit of information. We adopted Joshua at birth. His birth mother was 15 years old. We were in the delivery room when our son was born. Joshua was the second baby that we adopted. Michael was the first child we adopted and was such an incredible delight. And we really weren't expecting to adopt. If you know anything, we have adopted 6 kids, Michael being one of them, Joshua being another, a lot of them. It's gloomy and overcast, which is very unusual for this time of year in Portland. Is that a good sign or is this a bad sign? See all this traffic and the road work? We're going to abort this mission today because I forgot they have shut down a major freeway for road work. So we're gonna go home and I'm gonna tell you Joshua's story and we're gonna try to find him maybe tomorrow, this weekend. As you can see, we had a little change of plan because of Portland traffic. What I thought I would do is tell you Joshua's story, and perhaps when the construction's gone and I can actually get to downtown Portland, we're gonna find him because he's really been finding him and making sure he's okay has been at the top of my list for years. We were in the delivery room when Joshua was born, the birthing room. My husband cut his cord. From the minute Joshua was born, I knew there was a problem. You know, this wasn't my first rodeo. Joshua was my 4th infant, 4th newborn. When I first saw him, something was wrong. I realized he was not making eye contact. When we got him home, he cried continually. He would drink his bottles until he threw up. We thought he was starving. No, come to find out, Joshua didn't have, and still really doesn't have, you know how we know when we're full, like the gas tank, and you have that meter, okay, you've had enough gasoline, it's time to stop filling the pump, otherwise everything's gonna come out. Joshua didn't have that ability, and we had to limit his formula intake because he would just throw everything up. He wasn't like most babies. He would cry continually. You would go to sing him a song and he would flip and lose it. And he didn't just cry, he screamed at the top of his lungs. He wasn't a baby that you could put into a swing and let swing and, you know, give you a break for a minute so you could do housework or throw a little laundry in. That wasn't the case with our son. For the first 3 months, Joshua was wrapped in what they called, or we called, a burrito wrap, extremely tightly to prevent any movement from his arms and his legs. That was the only way he could stay quiet. If an arm moved, he would flip out. I had no answers. Joshua was born before it was routine to screen for autism. I took him to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. And I'll never forget a lot of their responses. One of the doctors said, and he knew that Joshua was adopted because he was the pediatrician that was on staff when he was born. He said to me, "If you don't want this baby, I'll take him." Really? Give me a break. Took him to other doctors and answers, we got answers all over the board, but we never, and they were about us. They were never addressing what's going on with my baby. No one would acknowledge I was the mother of 4 babies, 4 children. I knew enough to know something wasn't right with my son. You have to go with your gut. We were told you need parenting classes. All right, my husband had 3 kids. I had 2. We had adopted 1. No, I don't, before Joshua, I don't think parenting classes are the issue here. Another doctor said, he's too smart for you. Really? Okay. Another doctor told us we just needed to let babies be babies. Really? Really? So it's okay for him to pull things off of store shelves and scream and throw fits. My other kids didn't do that. They knew better. I knew I had a problem with my son. Parents, go with your gut. If you have a doctor telling you something, doesn't mean they're right. See another doctor. Find someone to listen to you. Then one day, all right, so Joshua had to be wrapped completely tightly. He avoided eye contact. I can look back and I can see autism screaming everywhere. He was delayed in his speech, although he is very high functioning now for autism, but there are some other factors in there that surfaced. When he was 7 years old, one of our children came to us and said, this article I read matches Joshua exactly. And the article was on sensory integration dysfunction. By that time we were living in Oregon. You know, I'm gonna tell you something. Being a mom, and I would see these horrific things on the news for parents that abused their children. It had never entered my mind to abuse one of my kids. With Joshua, that was different. I was 30 though when Joshua was born, 29. And so I was able to put him in his crib and walk away. I had that mechanism. I have never felt that frustrated in my life. I couldn't help my son. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if we had made a mistake. I knew God didn't make mistakes and he had put Joshua in our lives. I was losing it. And my husband would tell me, just give it 6 more weeks. Just give it 6 more weeks. When our son was about 2, I looked at him and I said, if you tell me 6 more weeks, one more time, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it. There's something wrong with the baby. Well, we took him to, I was able to get him into OHSU, which has a wonderful children's hospital and a wonderful diagnostic facility. They put Joshua through a battery of testing, several days of testing with this huge team. And I'll remember, one of the things I remember is sitting behind the glass that he can't see me, but I can see him, whatever that's called. And there's this doctor asking Joshua questions. He was 7 years old at that time. And she was showing him pictures of a cat and a dog and, you know, everyday items. And Joshua at first would say, well, that's a ball, that's a hat. And then after about the 3rd answer, I saw he was getting frustrated, and then I was like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? Because by 7, he had started to attack people. We didn't know what was going on. We just thought that was Joshua. You know, he was lining things up. He was doing all of this stuff. Today it makes sense. Didn't make sense to me then. But he looked at this woman when she asked him what this ordinary object was, with the look on his face. And he leaned into her and he said, for a doctor, you don't know very much, do you? Relief, oh my gosh, relief flooded my body. I was laughing, but really I was relieved he didn't jump over the table and attack her as he had our other kids. He had attacked one of our oldest daughters when she told him he couldn't go outside and play. She was babysitting. It was about 11 o'clock at night, if I remember correctly. And he pulled, at 4 years old, clumps of hair out of her head. It took the 2 other kids at the time to pull him off of her. This kid was strong. Well, during the testing, after the testing, they brought me in, they set me down, And I was with a panel of doctors. I'm guessing maybe 10 doctors were in the room, and Joshua was in another area where they were keeping him entertained. And they said, Teri, yes, Joshua has sensory integration dysfunction. I was filled with relief until they said, but for him, that dysfunction falls under the umbrella of autism. I felt like I was kicked in the stomach. And I asked them, I didn't really know what to say. I looked at him and I remember, because autism we didn't know a lot about back then. I said, so what you're telling me is my son's gonna be a janitor for the rest of his life? Oh, no, that's not what we're saying at all. But you need to be aware he has autism and he has sensory integration dysfunction. And they listed off several other things that my son had. Well, immediately I got him in to start seeing a therapist. By that time, when he was 7 years old, more research had come out that kids with autism, the earlier you intervene, the better. So in reality, Joshua should have been in therapy and intervention as soon as he was born, before he turned 1 max, but he wasn't. We didn't have that chance with him. As Joshua grew, everyone knew his quirks, but he was smiling, he was happy, and he was sweet, and he had such a beautiful smile and a head full of beautiful brown ringlets. He was a delight. He was an absolute delight when he wasn't being a pain in the butt. And it wasn't his fault that he was doing these things. He was being controlled by this disorder. When we got the report that Joshua had autism, I copied that report and I sent it to every doctor we had seen that had said, you don't know what you're talking about. And basically I told them, you don't know what you're talking about. Had you guys accurately diagnosed my son, we wouldn't have lost 6 years trying to help him. And maybe we would have had some reprieve from some of the actions and would have been able to teach him better social skills. For instance, we had to teach him when people would say, hi, Joshua, how are you doing? And robotically, he would say, fine, thank you for asking, how are you? Well, we really had to work on the fine, thank you for asking, how are you? We got him to realize he needed to be interested in other people. He was a handful. At the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was totally exhausted. As he grew, his rages became more violent. He attacked us more frequently, and he was much more strong. There were several times where he attacked me and attacked my husband, attacked other children, and we had to call the authorities. One of the last times that it happened, we ended up taking him to the hospital and we wanted a psych eval because there was something more than autism happening. We took him to the ER. I had defensive wounds on me. Joshua had no wounds on him. We were in the battle and I was of the mindset, if I let this kid win this war, it's only gonna be worse. So I fought back. And I don't remember if it was that time or another time when he had me down and was going to kill me. 2 of my sons came in and pulled him off of me, held him until we could call the police. At that point, we made sure at their direction that we had pepper spray strategically placed throughout the house where Joshua didn't know where it was. We also had flex cuffs so we could restrain him until authorities got there. They knew the danger we were in. We knew the danger we were in. Then came the day where Joshua was 18. And I don't mean it to sound like there were just bad days with Joshua, because there weren't. There were incredibly wonderful, sweet, warm days with Joshua. Joshua was becoming increasingly agitated, and he went after my husband. So Joshua was 18 at that time, very muscular. One of the things I learned about autism is many of the guys with autism, many of the males with autism have an extra dose of, or are producing extra testosterone. I don't know if that is accurate or not, but my son was extremely strong. He went after my husband to kill him. My husband pulled his gun. My husband's life was in jeopardy. Joshua was on one side of the kitchen. My husband was on the other side of the kitchen, pointing a gun at my son, and I'm on the phone to 911. So they got there. That was the night That was the night Joshua left our home. And even though he was my most difficult child in one way to raise, I cried the entire night. I cried the entire night. I made sure he had a cell phone. I made sure I wasn't familiar with people living on the streets at that time. I made sure he had what he needed. And I called him the next day and said, son, if you'll go to therapy and take your medication, you can come home. He said, oh no, Mom, I love it here. That was 8 years ago. Since then, things have manifested and been identified. There were times that Joshua would come home and stay for a couple of weeks to maybe a month or two. I found one of his journals, and when I was looking through his journal, there were very organized thoughts, ideas, goals, although unrealistic, but they were the goals of an autistic child. On other pages, I saw scribbling and letters and spirals and chaos and anger, and they were all intermixed. And I didn't want to ask any leading questions, but I wanted to find out what Joshua was thinking. Now, we've all seen, or many of us have seen, A Beautiful Mind, and we had dealt with a number of foster children by that time, so I pretty much knew what this scribbling, chaotic mess was on the paper, but I wanted Joshua to tell me. I showed him the book, the journal. I said, Joshua, oh my gosh, your goals, these are incredible. I'm really proud of you. This is great. I don't understand these pages here that are so scribbled and just, I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me? He said, yeah, Mom, that's when God's talking to me. And I paused. I said, what do you mean that's when God's talking to you? He said, well, he and his angels, they speak to me a lot, and they talk so quickly that I have to write really fast to get everything down. Schizophrenia in its earliest. Since then, I've been fighting the city of Portland. Living in a state, in a county like this is very difficult. I can't get a mental eval on my son. I've been trying for 8 years to get guardianship. I now have the police and the hospitals on target with me to call me. But a lot of times what happens is when he goes into the hospital and I tell them I want a psych eval done, they tell me, we don't want to infringe on his rights. We don't want to take his rights away. You know what I've started asking? When they tell me that, and they tell me every flippin' time, we don't want to take his rights away, which basically means he's going to have to severely injure someone or kill someone before they'll step in and intervene. I began asking them, and it totally throws them off guard. Okay, so you don't want to take his rights away. You're telling me he's psychotic and you're seeing the psychosis, but you don't want to take his rights away. So why don't you take him home with you and let him sleep in the bedroom next to your children or your wife? Then they start to stumble, then they start to backpedal, then they don't want to talk to me anymore. I find caseworkers and they'll work with Joshua, but he's not willing to work with them. He's afraid of them. Joshua has told us ISIS beheaded his girlfriend, and then the doctors were able to put her head back on. And I've had these conversations with him in front of doctors and nurses and social workers. It's in his chart. That is not normal thinking. They won't do anything. Joshua's afraid that Bilderberg is reading his thoughts. He's afraid of cell phones. Being downtown, my son that was so against medication and drugs of any form has also become a meth addict. He's been arrested numerous times, and I don't know what to do. If you guys have any ideas, let me know. I don't know what to do to help my boy. As you saw, we went out to try to find him today, and there was no way I was going to be able to get to downtown Portland today. But I do want to find him just to see him. He can't. There's a court order. He cannot come to my home. He cannot be around me in our home. He cannot be around my husband or any of our kids in our home. You know, I tell these people, we'll buy a little house and a piece of property and we'll put Joshua in it. But Joshua wouldn't stay. I know he wouldn't stay there. When it's cold,
Winters here in Portland are not fun. They get very, very cold. They don't like the shelters. There are more than enough resources here for the homeless, but they don't like to utilize them, especially the ones that are mentally ill. They're afraid they're going to be captured. My son is a shell. He's a walking shell. And people don't get this next part. And if you don't, forgive me. If you are in my shoes, you might. Because when my husband first started to tell me this, I would get extremely angry and tell him to stop. But as a Christian, I don't want my son to hurt anyone. That would be the worst phone call ever, was that my son hurt someone. I pray God takes him home. He has no quality of life. If you look in his eyes, there's nothing there. He's a walking shell, a very dangerous one. He's sharing needles. I'm sure he has every disease known to man. I am so afraid of him hurting another person. I am so afraid of getting a phone call saying my daughter was murdered by your son. When I'm called by the police, my first question to them is, are you okay? Then I ask about my son. It's wonderful news when he's hospitalized or when he's in jail, because I know he's out of the elements. Guys, what you're seeing before you is a mom that has so many stories of all of my children. But Joshua today is on my heart. If you are a believer, if you believe in the power of prayer, pray for my son, Joshua, Isaiah, Taylor, and I'll leave his last name out. I want my sweet boy back. I remember one time sitting to write. He was so beautiful. This head full of curly, long, loose curls that fell and around his beautiful little face. Oh, he was hard. He was hard. He was very, very hard. And I'm sorry, thoughts are coming at me in different areas here, but I remember one of the things I asked the team of doctors when they diagnosed my son was, is this why we didn't bond? I said yes. Kids with autism many times don't have the ability to bond. So that was a hard one. Knowing that Joshua didn't, it was hard, but it was liberating because we tried hard to bond with him. It just didn't happen until he got older and was on the streets. When he's sick, he wants his mom. When he's hurt, he wants his mom. But now I think he's even afraid. He's made comments about surveillance on our home. He's made comments about people watching and knowing and being able to read his thoughts. One thing that's so frustrating is all of this could be, except for the autism, all of this could be taken care of if he would be medicated, if I could get him off the streets and he could be medicated. The schizophrenia would be put at bay. The bipolar disorder would calm down. And maybe my son would emerge. When I picture my son right now, I picture him inside black claws holding him captive. And another thing, bad parenting is everywhere. If you see a kid throwing a fit in a grocery store, yeah, sometimes they're just brats. I got onto some the other day riding their bicycles through the store. Ain't flying with me. But some kids, those parents are struggling. They're doing everything they can and they don't know how to control these children. Autistic children will have breakdowns, meltdowns. You don't know when they're coming and you cannot stop them. You can just stay safe. That's really, I guess, all I have to say for now on my son. I love him. I hope he's okay. I know some of his friends watch this vlog. If you do and you see him, tell him his mama loves him. His dad loves him, and we pray for him continually. One thing we won't do, we will not give him money. We will not give him cell phones. We will not do any of that. We will take him to get food, but we will not give him anything that he can sell for drugs or that will be stolen, because Portland has so many resources for the homeless, but they're unwilling to help the mentally ill. Guys, if you have an answer, drop them in the comments. Thanks for hanging in with me. Hopefully we'll find him soon. Peace out. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Until next time.